Yeah, you sure? Yeah, I heard that some people were saying it was a bit difficult to understand and to follow. So this is kind of how it is sometimes, because it's a very mixed group. Some people here have been around for decades, and it's true. And some have kind of recently arrived, right? So it's very difficult to find kind of something that is suitable for everyone. But what you will find is that as we carry on, it will become more obvious what is going on. Yeah, some of the things that come later on are actually fairly straightforward, and you will understand what you have to do. So don't worry too much, and just take on board the things that you can. And if you don't understand, then there is a potential for better understanding in the future. Think about it like that. And it's not actually all that complicated. It's just that sometimes it sounds complicated because maybe the teacher is no good or something like that. The problem. So, okay. So we have just been looking at the idea of how to look at the body as the earth element. The other parts of the body that are solid, they are like the earth element. And once you see the body in that way, it's like you lose a little bit of attachment to the body, because you realize it is just nature taking its course. You can't really control it. It goes back to nature. It comes from nature. And because of all of that, you lose some of your attachment to the body. Because you lose some of the attachment, and because you know that things that happen, like ear contact, you hear something through the ear, you know that this is just nature happening. Yeah, when you hear things. One of the reasons why we talk about the ear here is that the ear is an aspect of these four elements. Yeah, we hear because of the four elements. The ear arises out of the four elements. This is the connection here with the ear. And we understand that this is nature. Yeah, it has to be like this. You have to hear many things that are not really agreeable to you. And when you understand that, you let go a little bit. You don't take it so seriously when you hear disagreeable things. And you are able to deal with it with equanimity or even compassion and kindness as you reflect in this way. This is the idea. The underlying idea is always to overcome defilements and purify the mind. That is almost an underlying idea in all the suttas about how to practice and purify ourselves, and make the mind more ready for meditation, so the meditation can happen automatically. All right. So this is what we had a look at, and the last thing we saw was how, based on that element alone, the mind becomes eager, confident, settled, and decided. And this means, and you have to understand the idiom here, how things are phrased. This basically means that you are achieving samadhi. These are words that are meant to signify samadhi, often the jhana states, in fact. So then we can move on. But before that, I will have a look at this drink. I asked the person what is inside. They had no idea what's inside. So this is very exciting here. It's good stuff. Okay, so thank you very much for that. This will keep my throat even better here. That's marvelous. Okay, so carrying on. Others might treat that mendicant with disliking, loathing, and detestation, striking them with fists, stones, sticks, and swords. Right, so this is now getting worse. Before it was just verbal harassment, now it is physical harassment. They understand that this body is such that fists, stones, sticks, and swords strike it. But the Buddha has said in the simile of the sword. So again, the same kind of idea that if you have been born into a human body, sometimes we can expect pain, all the kind of things happening to this body, stones, sticks, and so hopefully you don't get struck by too many swords. That's kind of unfortunate. If the swords come out, then it's kind of life is usually short. Life is inverse. The length of life is inversely proportional to the number of swords that strike you. So I'm just messing around. I apologize. So This is the nature of the body, yeah, that it hurts sometimes in various ways. And because it is the nature of the body, then we are able, again, to deal with that in a skillful way. Instead of getting upset and angry and rejecting things or whatever, we deal with it with compassion and kindness, as the Buddha has said in the simile of the soul. And many of you will know the simile of the soul. Yeah, how many people know the simile of the soul already? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so great. Yeah, so it's kind of one of the famous similes of the Buddha, right? And a very beautiful and very powerful simile. And sometimes when you hear these kind of similes, you think the Buddha is setting the bar too high. How can I possibly practice like this? This is what you think. But surprisingly, you can actually practice like this. Everyone here is able to do that. It's about having the right attitude. The purpose of this retreat is to develop our perception. Yeah, perception, again, is the idea how we understand the world. So by understanding the world in a slightly different way, by altering our perception of the world, we can practice in line with the simile of the soul. If you want to look up that specific simile, it's already mentioned here, but it's mentioned in more detail. It's found in the middle-length sayings number 21, 21st Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya. It's called the Kakachupana Sutta in Pali, the simile of the soul. And there you can read the whole sutta. It's a beautiful sutta to read. But here is a summary of that simile. So this is how that simile goes. Even if low-down bandits were to sever you limb from limb, anyone who had a malevolent thought on that account would not be following my instructions. This is the summary of that simile, right? Even if bandits come and in that simile they take a saw and they saw off your legs, they saw off your arms, and then middle they saw you off in the middle or whatever. They saw you apart, limb from limb. If you feel any kind of anger towards those people, you're not following the Buddha's instruction. What do you think, Jeff? A high standard? Too high. It says, Eileen, you've been around for a long time. You should be able to do this. No, I'm being sorry, Eileen. I shouldn't. That's demanding too much of you. I agree. Yeah. So it's interesting, though, that the Buddha actually even gives a kind of simile like this because it sounds impossible. How can you just, someone pins you to the ground, you can imagine 4 or 5 strong people hold you down, they take out the sword, they start sawing off your limbs. Yeah, and according to that simile, not only are you not supposed to be angry, you're supposed to have compassion and metta towards those people as they saw you apart, limb from limb. You know, that's the standard of the Buddha. So how is that possible? How can that be done? And I will tell you the secret. This is not the secret, actually it's open in the open because the Buddha's teachings are always out in the open. But if I say it's a secret, it sounds more interesting. It's a secret. So how is that possible? And the answer is that it's basically to turn your perceptions around. Usually when someone does that to us, we take it personally. We think they are doing this against me. And we think, oh, they're bad, they are hurting me, they're doing all of these bad things. And if you think like that, of course, you're going to get angry. That is the wrong way of thinking. First of all, it's not personal. It's got nothing to do with you, really. It has to do with these bandits. They are just bad people, and bad people do bad things. It doesn't matter if it's you or someone else, they will do it to someone, right? It's got nothing to do with you. It has to do with their inner qualities of mind, their habits, their personality, the way they have been conditioned. Yeah? And if you have been conditioned in a way that you happily saw people apart, limb from limb, imagine what kind of mind that is. Yeah, it's a really bad mind, right? And what kind of person is it that goes around sawing people apart like that? It's a terrible mind state. And when you understand a little bit about the kind of mind state that is required to do such an evil thing, and you understand that these people need compassion. Yeah, they are trapped in some kind of like personal hell realm almost, right? Where they misunderstand the nature of the world. And probably when they do that, they think that they are doing the right thing, because everyone in the world thinks that they are doing the right thing. This is the nature of humanity. Even when we do bad things, we think it is necessary. Even the worst criminals in the world, the genocide, the people who commit genocide, they think that they are doing the right thing in some twisted, stupid, crazy way. And so then, when you start to think like this about these people, they are creating enormously bad karma for themselves. Who knows where they're going to get reborn and how long they're going to get reborn in that bad state. Once you see that, you start to feel sorry for them, compassion. You guys, you don't know what you're doing. Yeah, here I am, I'm a good Buddhist, I'm practicing well, I have compassion for you, and you saw me apart in this way. You don't know what you're doing. You can have a really bad future for yourself. Then your heart opens up for these people, because you're no longer focused on your pain. You've already forgotten about your pain, in a sense. It may be there in the background. You're feeling really terrible about people doing such stupid things, thinking that they are creating happiness for themselves, when actually all they're doing is creating enormous amounts of suffering for themselves. And then you turn things around. Instead of being focused on you, instead of being trapped in your little world, me world, my small world, which is scary, but everything else around me sounds frightening, because everything else around me has the potential for inflicting pain on me. Instead of going into your small little self-centered world, you open up your heart, and you open up compassion for the whole world around you. And the whole thing just transforms. Even a difficult experience like that becomes beautiful as a consequence. And that is the idea of the simile of the soul. And if you are able to do that, then yes, okay, maybe they saw you apart limb from limb. And maybe what happens when that happens? Well, you're going to lose so much blood. Yeah, you're going to die within a few minutes anyway. And if you have those kind of thoughts, bing, you become a deva. Yeah, straight away. You go up to the heavenly realm, and then you kind of chillax. And then you have even more compassion, right, for these poor people, because soon enough they get reborn in a terrible place as a consequence. So this is how you do this. And all it does, it takes a change of perception, thinking about the world in a different way, not going along with how everyone else in the world thinks about these things, but thinking in accordance with the Buddha. This is what the Buddha recommends. It's powerful stuff. It's really super duper powerful. And it is not that hard to do. You just need to shift, gradually move your supertanker around. Yeah, the supertanker slowly, slowly, slowly. And one day you have these kind of thoughts. Can do? No? Okay, no, that's very slowly, right? You can do a little bit. As you do a little bit more, and one day you'll be surprised what you can do. Okay, good. So let us move on. Actually, we should maybe stay with that one. That's really enough for the whole session, I think, because it's so profound. But yeah, it doesn't work like that. We have to move on now. So then it goes on. It says, my energy shall be roused up and unflagging. My mindfulness established and lucid. My body tranquil and undisturbed, my mind stilled in samadhi. Gladly now let fists, stones, sticks, and swords strike this body, for this is how the instruction of the Buddhas are followed. Yeah, so if you are able to have this kind of idea about people who really treat you badly, then you will have all this beautiful energy in the mind. Yeah, the mind will become energized. And this is one of the things that you will find when your meditation is going well. You're feeling a bit of joy, mindfulness is strong. You feel that energy is also strong. Yeah, you have a sense of power inside of you, an inner kind of power. And this is what happens when you are able to overcome these terrible defilements in this way. I remember one of the things that always impressed me, I remember in the old days, Ajahn Brahmali would say that when you get into a deep state of meditation, he would say, you feel like a nuclear reactor. Yeah, so the energy is so strong, you feel like this nuclear reactor inside. This is kind of the energy that you can have when meditation is really, really profound. So if you're not feeling like the nuclear reactors yet, you will soon, hopefully. That's kind of where we are heading towards nuclear reactors. I wonder whether you can plug the meditator up to the grid and get free energy here. That'd be interesting, right? Supplying energy to the grid. That'd be interesting. Well, it must be very green energy, right? Plugging the meditator up to the grid like that. Must be ideal energy. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, maybe that's kind of taking it too far. So the energy is roused up and unflagging. In other words, it carries on. The mindfulness is established and lucid. This is what happens when you have a very positive mind states like this. Powerful mindfulness, really strong sense of presence. Yeah, the mind is really there. And the body is tranquil and undisturbed. It is not stressed out at all. It's the opposite. This is what I was mentioning before, the idea of feeling really relaxed and really mindful at the same time. This is what you see here when you are moving towards samadhi in this way. And then the mind is immersed in, the body is tranquil and disturbed, and the mind is immersed in samadhi. The samadhi is coming together as a consequence. And then, because you are, your mind is so powerful, you say, gladly now, let fists, stones, sticks, and swords strike this body. So this is how the instructions of the Buddhas are followed. So you are pretty at ease, yeah? And it reminds me of a sutta another sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya called the Punnovada Sutta, the instructions to Punna. And according to this Punnovada Sutta, Punna was a disciple of the Buddha and was practicing really well. And he says to the Buddha, I want to go and travel to the Sunaparanta country. And Sunaparanta is like really on the outskirts. The Buddha, he was really around the Ganges River. Yeah, that's where he was teaching. Yeah, around the Ganges plain, it is sometimes called. And Sunaparanta was kind of outside of the normal area. And it was famous for being really wild and dusty, kind of desert. Maybe it was towards the drier part of India. What's it called? Maharashtra, whatever. The western side of India, where it goes towards Afghanistan, that area. And so the Buddha says to Punna, we want to go to Sunaparanta. It's all dusty, and the dogs are really fierce, and there's no Buddhists over there. You're going to be lonely, and are you sure you can take it? He said, yes, I can take it. But what if they what if they abuse you? And Buddha said, well, if they abuse me, I will say, well, thank you for not kind of hitting me with, clods of earth. But what if they hit you with clods of earth? Well, I will say, thank you for not throwing stones at me. But what if they do throw stones at you? Well, I will say, thank you for not striking me with swords. You know the story? But what if they do kind of stab you with swords? Well, then I will say, well, thank you for not killing me. But what if they do kill you? Well, then I will say that, there were other monks. They had to search for an assassin to die because they were fed up with life. They want to die. I didn't even have to search for an assassin. And the Buddha said, okay, you're ready for the Sunaparanta country. Right? So it's kind of this idea of positive attitude. A little bit like this here. Now let the clods strike me or whatever. And even if you die, if you are a person who has easy access to samadhi and this level of metta that this person has here, you're not afraid of death anymore. Death is kind of irrelevant because you know that your future is going to be a good one. It's almost like an intuitive knowledge. Yeah, you don't actually have to ask anyone. You know that because your mind is so pure now. And so you go straight off to a really good destination afterwards. So if you want to be free of fear of death, well, this is the answer. Have metta, have compassion, have deep meditation, and the fear of death will be completely gone now. So then it goes on. While recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha in this way, equanimity based on the skillful may not become established in them. In that case, they stir up a sense of urgency. It is my loss, my misfortune. that while recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha in this way, equanimity based on the skillful does not become stabilized in me. So while recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, so we have just been recollecting a teaching of the Buddha. Yeah, so when you recollect the teaching of the Buddha, you are also, that is the Dhamma. And because it comes from the Buddha, you're also recollecting the Buddha at the same time. And then you are also recollecting earlier on a bit how this practice is done, and that you can argue that's the Sangha right there. So in a sense, the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha always come together in this way. So by recollecting teaching, you're also recollecting the triple Dhamma. So by this recollection, equanimity should be established. Yeah, you should no longer be concerned about these people harming you. And that is good. But if it doesn't happen, then you should get a sense of urgency. Yeah, it is my loss, it is my misfortune that actually I don't give rise to this equanimity based on the skillful. Yeah, the sense of urgency, the sense of, wow, if I die now, I'm not ready to die because I haven't got that metta and compassion and equanimity that is required. They're like a daughter-in-law who stirs up a sense of urgency when they see their father-in-law. Yeah, remember in ancient India, I don't know if anyone of you have an Indian connection, but in ancient India, and it's a bit like that, maybe even now in India, is that when the daughter-in-law gets married, she moves to the parents-in-law, right? So she lives in the parents with her in-laws. That's kind of the way it was anyway in ancient India. And so she will always be around her in-laws. But if while recollecting the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha in this way, equanimity based on the skillful does become stabilized in them, they are happy with that. At this point, much has been done by that mendicant. So much has been done basically means you have attained the fourth jhana or something like that. So it's a bit of an understatement, but the suttas are a bit understated. And I kind of like that about the suttas. Yeah, it's like when you get to the third jhana, now you're happy. Yeah. Anything less? Or maybe not. Third jhana, you're so blissed out, you don't know what's going on anymore. That's kind of the scale by which happiness is measured. Yeah. So that is the basic teaching. And it's kind of remarkable. Yeah, all of this comes out of the idea of the earth element. Yeah, all of these things. Using the earth element to attain samadhi and then gaining this equanimity based on that. It's kind of extraordinary. Yeah. And then the same sequence happens for the other three, the remaining three elements. Yeah, it goes on to what is the water element, what is the fire element, what is the air element. And again, same thing. All the way to, at that point, much has been done by that mendicant. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to you. If things I say don't make sense, please feel free to write down questions and we can discuss them during the question time. When a space is enclosed by sticks, creepers, grass, and mud, it becomes known as a building. In the same way, when a space is enclosed by bones, sinews, flesh, and skin, it becomes known as a form, rupa. So here you can see how rupa basically is a reference to the body. The body is just like a building, yeah? You kind of get some random things together, it becomes a building. Yeah? These days you use steel and glass. Those days you use sticks, creepers, and mud to make buildings. But the idea is the same. You just put together some things and it gets a new name. In the same way, our bodies, you put together a bit of rice porridge and a bit of porridge and rice, and it becomes a body. Yeah, it gets all of these bits and pieces, the bone, sinews, and it becomes a body as a consequence. What is it? Is it anything apart from those bits and pieces? It's just a name. That's really all it is. Reverence, and now comes another interesting part here, which will reinforce what we looked at in the previous sutta. So Buddha says this, reverence, though the I is intact internally, as long as exterior sights don't come into the range, and there is no corresponding engagement, there is no manifestation of the corresponding type of consciousness. Though the I is intact internally and exterior sights come into range, so long as there is no corresponding engagement, there is no manifestation of the corresponding type of consciousness. But when the I is intact internally and exterior sights come into range, and there is the corresponding engagement, there is the manifestation of the corresponding kind of consciousness. Yeah, so what this is saying, that for I consciousness to arise, you need three things. Right? Three things you need. You need, first of all, you have to have the I. Without the I, obviously you can't see. Then you need an object. Yeah, like object. That's craving. That was craving who made me lift. That made me lift that object, right? You see that? That wasn't random why I chose that particular object. There was a reason for that. That's kind of interesting, right there. So I, object, and then you have to also have a third thing, and this is the corresponding engagement. Right? These are the three things that are required for you to see something, for the consciousness to arise. I, object, and then you have to have the engagement, and then the experience happens, right? And so what does this mean? Well, what it means is that, for example, if you are occupied by listening to something, even if your ear is there, if you're occupied with listening something, even if your eye is there and there are objects around you, you will not see because you're occupied with the listening. Your attention goes to the ear, doesn't go to the eye. Yeah, so you have to have the attention going to the eye. Only then does the eye consciousness, the contact arise, and you have an experience of seeing something. Yeah, eye, object, and attention. And as I mentioned during the previous sutta, I will maybe recapitulate a little bit because I think people found this a bit hard going, what I was talking about. So the idea with this is very significant because it means that our engagement with the world is not just automatic. Yeah, we don't just engage with things because things are there. Yeah, that is not how engagement works. Engagement depends on our attention. And that is a very positive thing because what that means is that we can train our attention in the right way. We can engage with the world in a positive sense. Yeah, so we learn how to attend in the right way. And as we learn how to attend in the right way, we will see and hear those things that are useful to see and hear. Not only will they be useful, but we will also train our attention that we actually see them in a particular way, that it makes them even more useful. We look for the right things, and we also look for them in the right kind of way. Yeah, so this is kind of how this is what we come back to where I started out with the idea of developing our perceptions. When we change our perceptions, it means that the way we attend to the world changes. Yeah, so for example, we saw before how one of the distortions or perversions of perception is that we see permanence where there is impermanence, right? It's one of the suttas we saw before. And this is kind of one of the problems in life, right? So we look at people, we think this is my relationship, and we tend to see a relationship that we have with someone as solid. Yeah, we tend to think of it as more permanent than it actually is. And so then we train our perception to remind ourselves that all the relationships that we have with all the people in our life, they're all uncertain, unreliable, impermanent. So we have a more realistic approach to the relationships and the friends in our life, understanding how uncertain it is. And it's kind of fascinating. And sometimes I think about, my relationship with Ajahn Brahm, because he sits almost next to me a lot of the time. And so I say to Ajahn Brahm, oh, maybe Ajahn, you should eat more healthy, yeah, not so many baked beans and a little bit less condensed milk, and not so much bacon, and have a few vegetables or whatever. And of course, with Ajahn Brahm, you can't really change him. He is the way he is. And I said to him, oh, you may die. He said, oh, yeah, okay. He doesn't really care about whether he's going to die or not. That's kind of irrelevant for Ajahn Brahm. And so you realize that actually the problem is really my problem. Yeah, I'm the one who would like him to live. What about you? Would you like Ajahn Brahm to live? Yeah, that's your problem, right? But that's not problem. And so it's my problem then. And then I realized, actually, it is precisely this kind of issue that is the problem. I want things to be more permanent than they actually are. Ajahn Brahm is impermanent. What do you expect? Of course he's impermanent. Yeah? And that is when you change your perception and you realize, well, it's should really be, it's on me to understand the world in the right way and change my perception. That is what this is about. And then next time I look at Ajahn Brahm, I look at him in a slightly different way. Yeah, I remember the idea of impermanence. So I don't bother him with telling him to eat good things. Okay, here, have another piece of bacon as well as next time. And actually, that works with Ajahn Brahm. Yeah, if you use reverse psychology. And he said, oh no, actually today I think I might have the vegetable. That's kind of what Ajahn Brahm will do. Ajahn Brahm is a very rebellious kind of character. He doesn't like to be controlled by other people. It's reverse psychology. So don't tell him I said this is a highly top secret classified information. So, but what it means is that this whole idea that we can develop our perceptions, we can change how we look at the world. Next time we look at something, instead of bringing desire into what you look at, desire, actually, no, I should use this just for my throat. Yeah, that's kind of why people give me this wonderful drink to clear my throat, not because I should, can like it a little bit, but not too much attachment. And then you use it in the right way because you don't desire it anymore. Use it as a medicine instead. Okay, do I need it now? No, not yet. I'll put it back in there. The right kind of attitude there. And so we change how we think about things in the world. We look at things in a new way. And so then when we attend to the world, because our attention has been rectified, it has been established through correct perceptions, we attend to things in a different way. We don't look at things which are useless. We don't listen to things that are useless. And when we listen with the right kind of attitude. Yeah, and that then becomes something which helps us on the path. And so the rest of this sutta that we're going to look at is precisely about exactly how we can change our perceptions so as to make the way we attend to the world more useful for our practice. Yeah, this is the sort of thing I was trying to say before in the previous sutta, the honey ball sutta, or whatever it was called. It's a similar kind of idea that we see here, but here it is spelled out more clearly in this particular sutta. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, then please let us know, and we'll see if we can sort it out. So there is the manifestation of the corresponding kind of consciousness. What does that mean, corresponding kind of consciousness? And what it means is that there are different kinds of consciousnesses. There is ear consciousness, sight consciousness, nose consciousness, body consciousness. So if you see through the eye, then you have eye consciousness. If you hear through the ear, you have ear consciousness. And these are different kinds of consciousness. That's the significant point here. There's no overlap between them. And that is a very critical point because it means that there is no continuity in the mind either. And this becomes then the ground for insight when you achieve very deep samadhi down the track here. Okay, then when Sariputta says, this is quite dense, there's a lot of information here. So for those of you who are new, if you don't quite grasp it, don't worry, just take on board what you can take on board, and these things will gradually become clear over time. The form produced in this way is included in the grasping aggregate of form. The feeling produced in this way is included in the grasping aggregate of feeling. The perception produced in this way is included in the grasping aggregate of perception. The choices produced in this way are included in the grasping aggregate of choices. The consciousness produced in this way is included in the corresponding grasping, in the grasping aggregate of consciousness. Yeah? So every time we experience something, every time we contact the world in this way, and you have an experience, that experience contains all the 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates here are 5 aspects of our personality, right? So you have the form, which is like the solid, like the body. Feeling is whether something is good, bad, or neutral. Perception is how we recognize things in the world, yeah? How we're able to make sense of the world. That's kind of perception. Choices is the will, is when we will something, when we are doing something, when we're creating something, when we're acting in the world, we're making a choice. This is choices. And consciousness is just the ability to be aware, it's awareness itself. And these are 5 critical aspects of a human being or any kind of being. And pretty much all the time, those aspects are there. Yeah? Right now, if you think about it, those aspects are there, right? Forms, you can see lots of forms around you, or your own body. Feeling, what does it feel like to be here? Hopefully it feels good. Maybe for some of you it feels bad, I don't know. Maybe you think Buddhism is just too much, or too, I don't know what. Maybe you don't like Buddhism anymore after hearing these things. That's kind of the danger of being a teacher. Some people get turned off, yeah, because you can't really, you don't get there properly. Oh well. Hopefully most of you have good feelings. Perception, yeah, is the ability to understand what I say. That's perception, because it's just like noises coming out of my mouth, but somehow you make sense of that. That's kind of extraordinary, this human ability to make sense of these noises that come out of someone else's mouth. Isn't that extraordinary when you think about it? We build up this picture of what someone is saying based on these noises. It's really an amazing ability when you think about it. But that's an aspect of perception, the ability to make sense of things in this way. And then the choices that you're making right now is the choice to listen or not to listen, yeah, or whatever it might be. And consciousness is the awareness of the whole situation. These are the 5 aggregates. And the 5 aggregates are always there. And when you change your object, there's a new kind of 5 aggregates, yeah? Sometimes it is related to the ear, sometimes to the sight. Perceptions are different, feelings may change. So every moment is like a new set of aggregates in a sense, yeah? Always changing, moving on. And they are created through our attention in this way. Whenever you attend to something else, a new aggregates kind of arise. So this is what this is saying here, and these aggregates, they are included in the grasping aggregate. Yeah, they are all part of this. An aggregate just means a group of phenomena grouped together. Anyway, let's leave it at that. Yeah. They understand. So this is how there comes to be inclusion, gathering together and joining together into these 5 grasping aggregates. But the Buddha has said, one who sees dependent origination sees the Dhamma, and one who sees the Dhamma sees dependent origination. And these 5 grasping aggregates are indeed dependently originated. The desire, adherence, attraction, and attachment for these 5 grasping aggregates is the origin of suffering. Giving up and getting rid of desire, greed for these 5 grasping aggregates is the cessation of suffering. At this point, much has been done by that mendicant. So what the Buddha, when Buddha is doing here, he is starting with the various elements, and it goes from the elements to form, and it goes from that form to the 5 khandhas, yeah, the 5 aggregates, and it goes from that to the noble truths. So it's like reversing the previous sequence, coming back to the 4 noble truths again. Yeah, it's this beautiful way of putting together the Dhamma. It's really skillfully done. So, first of all, it talks about how there is the inclusion, the gathering together, the joining together into these five aggregates. Yeah, it is through our experiences all the time. We are kind of building up these aggregates, yeah, depending on how we experience the world. And then one who sees dependent origination sees the teaching. One who sees the teaching sees dependent origination. So these five aggregates are dependently originated. So you understand the dependent origination of the five aggregates. Yeah, this is kind of what this next thing is about. So we build, the way this works is that we build up the five aggregates in this life, yeah, by having experiences, by attaching to them in certain ways, by rejoicing in certain aspects of these things. And then when we die, yeah, because we're already attached to these five aggregates, we carry on being attached to them. That is how we get reborn. This is how they are dependently originated, life after life, carrying on, moving on and on and on. So it's the attachment that we do right now, which becomes the fuel ultimately for rebirth in the future. Yeah, right now we're building up that attachment. And hopefully we're also reducing it a little bit at the same time. But this is where that rebirth process comes from. So if you understand dependent origination, you understand the Dhamma. Dhamma is the teaching of the Buddha. This is what we want to really get our head around, to penetrate dependent origination. Paticca Samuppada, this beautiful teaching of the Buddha, which is the middle way between eternalism and annihilationism. So, the desire, adherence, attraction, and attachment to these five aggregates is the origin of suffering, yeah? Because we are attached to these things, suffering originates. What does that mean? It means we get reborn. That's really what it means. And if you give up that attachment, etc., a desire for the five aggregates, this is a cessation of suffering because you don't get reborn. This is the point here. And it is the critical thing to understand that this really is about rebirth and not about suffering in the present. At this point, much has been done by that mendicant. So another understatement, because at this point you are a stream enter, and only a stream enter will have this kind of insight. Okay, then we have the same thing for the ear, for all the six senses, the ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Yeah, and mind, when the mind is intact internally, so long as exterior thoughts don't come into range and there's no corresponding engagement, there is no manifestation of the corresponding kind of consciousness. Though the mind is intact internally, etc., etc., but when the mind is intact internally and exterior thoughts come into range, and there is the corresponding engagement, there is the manifestation of the corresponding kind of consciousness, just like before, right? Mental phenomena are also included in this. So, for example, then maybe if you are meditating and there is like a thought in your mind, but you are focusing on the breath, it's like the thought doesn't really have an impact on you. You're not really engaging with the thought. And other times you really engage with the thought, and then your breath goes out of the window. You don't see the breath anymore. You can see that even thoughts in this way can be like almost like external objects. Yeah, this is kind of the idea here. And so then you engage with those things. The form produced in this way is included in the grasping aggregate of form. The feeling, perception, and choices and consciousness produced in this way are each included in the corresponding grasping aggregate. They understand, so this is how there comes to be the inclusion, gathering together, the joining together into these five grasping aggregates. But the Buddha has also said that one who sees dependent origination sees the teaching. One who sees the teaching sees dependent origination. And these five grasping aggregates are indeed dependently originated. The desire, adherence, attraction, and attachment for these five grasping aggregates is the origin of suffering. Giving up and getting rid of desire and greed for these five grasping aggregates is the cessation of suffering. At this point, much has been done by that mendicant. So it is all a bit mysterious, perhaps, and all a bit can be a bit hard to really fathom what is going on here. But the main idea that we see here, really, first of all, we use the element contemplation in an interesting way to attain samadhi. This is the first part of the sutta. Using the element contemplation, we attain samadhi. And this is what you find in the Satipatthana Sutta. Using the four elements, you actually move you towards samadhi. Once you have that samadhi, then you are able to contemplate the arising of the five aggregates in this way, because then the mind is really, really powerful. And then you can understand how you, the five aggregates, really is you. It's what you are, it's mind and body. And you understand how this mind and body is created and perpetuated through craving, through attachment, through desires. This is really what this is about. Dependent origination is about understanding the perpetuation of a person through craving and through attachments. It only happens after samadhi. So the main thing for now is to remember to purify your meditation as deeply as you possibly can. The deeper your meditation is, the greater will be your ability then to have insight into these things as a consequence. The first thing is to get your meditation together, in a deep way. So if your meditation is already going well, then is the time to contemplate these particular things. So this is essentially what this sutta is about. So it really is about all the usual things that we see in the suttas. It is nothing different. It is just kind of explained in a more detailed fashion and a little bit of a complex fashion also. But the main point, the main reason why I chose this particular sutta is to make the point that developing our perceptions is fundamental to the path. And as we develop our perceptions, our engagement with the world around us changes. We see the world in new ways. We see people in new ways, right? People that before we may have been upset with, now we see them with compassion instead. And this is perhaps one of the most important changes that we want to make, is getting away from these very negative and bad habits of ill will, and harshness and ruthlessness towards others. Getting away from that. These are very, very destructive emotions, and move towards compassion and kindness and care instead. This is maybe the most important thing. And if you are able to get that out of this retreat, understand how to do that, and in the future really apply your mind to overcome these negative qualities and negative habits. If you get that much out of this retreat, it's wonderful. I know that I teach these things on every single retreat because I think it is so incredibly important. And the vast majority of people in the world have too much ill will. If you have more than zero, it's too much, right? If you haven't got zero yet, then it's still too much. And it's very rare to find people who have zero ill will. It's incredibly rare, even though there are lots of wonderful people in a group like this who are actually practicing really well. Still, we can all probably do a little bit better still. And that is what this is about. So we learn to develop our perceptions. We engage with the world differently as a consequence. Less ill will, less greed, less stupidity, more clarity, more mindfulness, more peace in the way we engage with the world around us. We float more through our lives. Even if you are a hospital administrator and your life, you're the boss of the hospital, and the life is really just full and packed. You stand back more. You become more observing of what is going on. You don't allow yourself to be dragged around by all the problems and things in hospital. You still maintain a degree of clarity, even though your job is really demanding and really difficult. So I'm just talking to one specific person. I think she knows who she is, so it's going to be. So that is, this is kind of the idea. This is kind of what happens. And You see this with people who have a lot of mindfulness, even in what many people will consider stressful situations. They kind of stand back. They are mentally slightly detached from what is going on around them, right? They're able to react in the right way. And this is part of what happens when we use our perceptions in the right way. So there you are, the Mahahati-Padopama Sutta, which is Pali, means the greatest sutta on the elephant's footprint. And then what happened? What happened then is that is what Venerable Sariputta said. Satisfied, the mendicants were happy with what Sariputta said. Okay, so there you are. So now I'm going to have a little bit of this. Sessions that we're having are quite intense. There's a lot going on, a lot of information, so I hope you are okay. You don't feel that you are drowning. I know some of you are not drowning, some of you are probably really enjoying it, and some of you may be drowning a little bit, but never mind. Shall we have a short break? Is that a good idea? A 5-minute break? Yes? No? Maybe? Yes? Okay, 5-minute break. Okay, good. Let's have a 5-minute break. And we are now going to have a look at a sutta called the Noble Search, and the Arya Parvesana Sutta in Pali, found in the middle-length sayings of the Buddha, number 26. And it's a long sutta, it's a very beautiful sutta. If you want to read one sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, this is one of the suttas I would really recommend you to read. It is about the Buddha talking about his own life, talking about his own experiences, especially before his awakening, and then his awakened experience, and then what happens soon after the awakening. And one of the things that is very interesting about the suttas, or the word of the Buddha, is that there are many biographical or autobiographical suttas like this, where the Buddha talks about his own life. There's quite a large number in the Majjhima Nikaya. There is Majjhima Nikaya 4, Majjhima Nikaya 12, Majjhima Nikaya 19, Majjhima Nikaya 26, 36, 85, 100, 128. All of these are autobiographical suttas. And then there's more as well. I was kind of counting them off the top of my head, but there are quite a few more as well. The Buddha talks about his own life. And so why does the Buddha talk about his own life? This is kind of one of those interesting things. And one of the reasons why I've been making this point throughout, that the Buddha is a human being just like us, is to make these autobiographical suttas come alive. Because the reason why the Buddha is talking about his own life, his own practice, is because he wants to encourage us to do the same thing. What he did, we should do the same thing. And for that to work, it is very important that the Buddha is seen as a human being just like us. If we make the Buddha into something more than us, if the Buddha is somehow elevated beyond humanity, then his practice has no relevance to us, because he will then be practicing differently. So if you have things like the Bodhisattva ideal, the Buddha practiced for 4 incalculable eons before he became the Buddha, that already starts to make it very difficult to relate to the Buddha, because his path is different from ours. His path is to purify the paramis and whatever. But this whole idea of purifying the paramis is really a later development. It is not really there in the early suttas. The early suttas, the Buddha is only a bodhisattva in his last life. That's what it says specifically. That is when he is practicing for awakening. That is where he has success. And very often when I say this to traditional Buddhists, they say, what are you talking about? Everyone knows that the Buddha was a bodhisattva for 4 incalculable eons. Who are you from Norway to tell us that the Buddha was not this? Actually, they don't say that, they only think that, because they don't want to be rude, right? So, but I think actually, this is precisely one of the benefits of not being part of a culture, is that you can sometimes see things in a new way. if you're part of a Buddhist culture, you're so used to certain ideas, it's very hard to extract yourself and see things anew. But when you come from the outside, it allows you a little bit more scope for thinking differently. There's also disadvantages with coming from the outside, because you don't have the same education in Buddhism, you don't have the same maybe faith in the Buddha that you have if you are part of a Buddhist culture. So I'm not saying it is always good to be outside, but for some things it's good to be outside, for some things it's good to be inside the Buddhist culture. Yeah? There's both pros and cons for these things. But when you do read the suttas, it is arguably, I think, quite clear that the Buddha was not a bodhisattva who carried on for 4 incalculable eons. Instead, he is just like us. In his last life, he was striving with defilements, striving with attachments, striving with all of these kind of things. And we will see that very soon that that is the case. And so his practice is the practice that we should also follow. He is an example for us, yeah? And that's why he teaches from his own life. This is important to understand, otherwise it's very difficult to really make out why the Buddha is talking about what he did. I shouldn't say the word, I should say the Buddha to be, because this is before his awakening we're talking about now. So this sutta is one of these beautiful suttas where the Buddha teaches what he did to become awakened, right? Isn't that exciting? So now we're going to see what the Buddha actually did, what he focused on, what made him become awakened. And if we can understand what made the Buddha become awakened, we know what we also have to do. So this is really, really super duper exciting. So, and you will be surprised at how simple it is. Now, we have just seen these very complicated suttas before, and you may think the Dhamma is beyond you because it's just too hard to understand for an ordinary person. But no, now we come into the opposite, how simple it actually is. Yeah, it can, depending on how we look at it, it can be complicated or simple. But the ideas are very simple. So this sutta is about the noble search. And let's just get straight into it and see what happens here now. So this is just an extract. Usually we do extract of suttas because they're too long to read the whole thing. And this here is the Buddha speaking. This is what he says. Good mendicants, it is appropriate for gentlemen like you, who have gone forth in faith from the lay life to homelessness, to sit together and talk about the teaching. When you're sitting together, you should do one of 2 things. Discuss the teachings or keep noble silence. So what has happened here is that the Buddha has just arrived. The monks, I haven't included the whole sutta, but the monks are kind of gathered together in the hall at the hermitage, and they are discussing the Dhamma. Specifically, they're discussing the Buddha himself and the Buddha's qualities. And even the story leading up to that actually is quite nice, because the Buddha is with Venerable Ananda. Venerable Ananda is obviously the Buddha's attendant, and so they come, Venerable Ananda says, please go to this hall out of compassion, because all the monks are there, maybe the nuns are there, maybe lay people are there, and they are waiting for you to hear a Dhamma discourse. Yeah? So the Buddha says, okay, or I doesn't say okay, but he says something like that. Okay didn't exist in those days. It's hard to imagine what they did without the word okay. Such a useful word, right? So that maybe had something similar. Okay, whatever. And so they walk towards this hall, and then when they come outside of the hall, they stand outside the doorway. This is the Buddha and Venerable Ananda, and they can hear the discussion going inside. So what does the Buddha do? Does you think he just walks to the door and says, I'm important, I'm here? No, he waits outside for them to finish the discussion. That's kind of, again, it gives you an idea of the Buddha, which is kind of different from how many people think about the Buddha. The Buddha is like polite. He belongs to society. Yeah, he does not kind of see himself as someone who does not have to follow the ordinary rules of courtesy and kindness. He follows the ordinary rules of courtesy and kindness. He waits till they have finished the discussion. That's kind of amazing. And then when they have finished the discussion, he coughs. Yeah. This is one of the things that we do as Buddhist monks. If you see a Buddhist monk coughing, it's not by accident. Well, sometimes it is, but usually. So this is actually a rule, yeah, in the Vinaya for the monks. So if you're kind of approaching a dwelling of another monk, you're supposed to cough when you get within range of hearing, yeah. So you're making your presence known, right? So if you see monks coughing at random places, you know what's going on. That's kind of the That's got nothing to do with it. And so he coughs. Yeah, again, a sign of politeness. Then the monks come and they open a door for him. And then the Buddha comes in and the Buddha sits down there. And then he says to the monks, what were you discussing there? Yeah, it's all very polite and very natural and very easy. A feeling that the Buddha is one monk among many monks, yeah, and they have kind of working together and discussing together. It's very natural and very humanizing, and makes the Buddha into a fairly ordinary human being. Of course, at this point he is enlightened. Of course, he is more than what most people are, but he's also a human being that is approachable in an ordinary way. And so this is the background story. And then the Buddha says, good mendicants, that you're discussing the Dhamma. You should either discuss the Dhamma or you should keep noble silence. So noble silence is the idea that when we are silent, if we do it in the right way, please don't force yourself to be silent, because if it is too forceful, it is no longer noble. But if it comes naturally and because it feels good, it will make you more quiet. Yeah, it will quiet down the mind. That's why it is noble, because it leads to noble qualities. So again, it should come naturally. However, if you try too hard to be silent when you kind of go slightly crazy because you're trying too hard, then it's not really noble silence anymore. So this is the idea: discuss the Dhamma, or you keep noble silence. And the highest kind of noble silence is the deep samadhi, when the mind becomes absolutely quiet. And then the Buddha says, mendicants, there are these two quests, the noble quest and the ignoble quest. Yeah, so there are a good search and the bad search, or the good quest and the bad quest. And so now we're going to talk about this good and bad search, or the good and bad quest. What is the ignoble quest? It's when someone who is themselves liable to be reborn seeks what is also liable to be reborn. Themselves liable to grow old, liable to fall sick, liable to die, liable to sorrow, liable to become corrupted. They seek also what is liable to these things. Yeah, this is the ignoble search. There is already a problem. We already have this problem, that of dying or whatever. Now we seek other things that have exactly the same problem. We're not looking for a solution. Instead, we are compounding and making the problem worse than it was originally. And that is why it is called the ignoble search. The anarya pariyasana, or whatever. So this is the problem. So now the Buddha is going to give an idea of what are these things that we are searching for in this ignoble way. And it's quite obvious when you see it. Yeah? What should be described as liable to be reborn? Partners and children, male and female bondservants, goats and sheep, chickens and pigs, elephants and cattle, gold and money, are liable to be reborn. Gold and money, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, anyway, liable to be reborn. Yeah, these attachments are liable to be reborn. Someone who is tied, infatuated, and attached to such things, themselves liable to be reborn, seeks what is also liable to be reborn. So the first thing here, of course, is that rebirth is considered problematic. Yeah, it is considered a not really a positive thing. And I'll maybe get into that a little bit more down below, why that is a problem. but it's certainly considered as a problematic here. So what are the things that are liable to be reborn in the future? Well, partners and children, right? Husband and wife and your children or whatever. Male and female bond servants, either like slaves or something similar. And then you have all the animals. In those days, they would have like farms, lots of animals, and your wealth would often be counted in how many animals you had. Goats, sheep, chicken, pigs, elephants, and cattle. And all of these things die and they get reborn. Gold and money are liable to be reborn. Well, they are liable to birth in the sense that they get created, right? We dig the gold out of the ground, we purify it, and this way we create the gold. And then eventually it disappears, and then you kind of recreate it. And the same thing with money. So they also have a degree of being liable to be reborn, I suppose, in this way. So all of these things are liable to be reborn, yeah? And these are the things that we attach to, yeah? These attachments are liable to be reborn. So really, what this is saying is that anything in your life that you attach to, yeah, a large part of that is liable to problems, basically. And if they're not liable to rebirth, they're liable to other problems, as we shall see further down there. So if you attach to things that are liable to problems, then you are liable to suffering because of that. Someone who is tied, infatuated, and attached to such things, themselves being liable to be reborn, seeks what is liable to be reborn. So the seeking here, yeah, the searching is the fact that you are attached, the fact that you are infatuated, the fact that you are tied to these things. That is the search. Because what we do when we are tied and attached to these things, we are looking for the holding on to these things. We're looking for grasping onto them in a way that is counter to their nature. The nature is to disappear. The nature is to be reborn. The nature is to move on. And yet we want to keep them because we are attached to them. We're seeking for something that is impossible. And that is the issue here. Yeah. And this is what life is like. Yeah? And we all know that is true. Yeah. Whenever you are attached to something, you will grieve when that thing gets taken away from you by nature or whatever it is. Yeah? That's the rebirth. Then comes growing old. What should we describe as liable to grow old? Partners and children, male and female slaves, goats and sheep. Yeah, maybe bond servants. Maybe that can be like the domestic helpers. Yeah, kind of. There are many of those in Singapore, right? Domestic helpers. So that's kind of one way of thinking about it, I suppose. Goats and sheep, not so many of those in the Singapore, but never mind. Chickens and pigs, elephants and cattle. No elephants, we found out earlier on. Gold and money are liable to grow old. These attachments are liable to grow old. Someone who is tied, infatuated, and attached to such things, themselves liable to grow old, seeks what is also liable to grow older. Yeah, all of these things, they gradually fade away, they grow older. Gradually, they kind of, and it's suffering to see the people in our lives grow older. Yeah, it is not nice to see that, and yet that is the reality of life, unfortunately. Yeah. So if we search for all of those things that grow older, it is another ignoble search. What should we describe as liable to fall sick? Partners and children, male and female slaves, goats and sheep, chickens and pigs, elephants and cattle are liable to fall sick. Yeah, unavoidable. These attachments are liable to fall sick. Someone who is tied, infatuated, and attached to such things, themselves liable to fall sick, seeks what is also liable to fall sick. And what should we describe as liable to die? Partners and children, male and female bondservants, goats and sheep, chickens and pigs, elephants and cattle are liable to die. These attachments are liable to die. Someone who is tied, infatuated, and attached to such things, themselves liable to die, seeks what is also liable to die. So, what should we describe as liable to sorrow? Partners and children, male and female bondservants, goats and sheep, chickens and pigs, elephants and cattle are liable to sorrow. These attachments are liable to sorrow. Someone who is tied, infatuated, and attached to such things, themselves liable to sorrow, seeks what is also liable to sorrow. Yeah, people in our life are liable to grieve and to be unhappy and to sorrow from time to time. And interesting here, also the animals are liable to sorrow. Isn't that kind of interesting? Yeah. I don't know if any of you, probably some of you have pets, yeah, and you probably, if you have a pet, you will notice that animals have emotions, just like human beings have emotions, right? Sometimes they are sad, sometimes they are happy, sometimes they have attachments. All of these kind of things are found in animals as well. Yeah, this is here in the suttas. This was already said 2,500 years ago. And in the West, we have treated animals really badly for a long time because we have said animals, they have no feelings. Yeah, they're just automatons, whatever the word is. And so they have no feelings, right? And that's because of that, they have no soul, and because that animals do not count, we can kill them willy-nilly as we like. And on that is kind of based all of the a lot of the cruelty of animals in the Western world. The idea that animals have no soul. Yeah, it's kind of a terrible thing. But of course, some of the people did realize that animals were suffering, and so they would still be kind to animals regardless of the kind of ideas in society. Of course, animals suffer. Yeah, it's kind of bleeding obvious. You don't have to open your eyes and you will see that. Sometimes we are blinded by the views of society around us. And so, an important point, yeah, you can see animals crying when they're really sad, for example, like elephants, very developed animals, and yeah, and they have sadness and sorrow, just like human beings. And what should be described as liable to corruption? Partners and children, male and female bondservants, goats and sheep, chickens and pigs, elephants and cattle, gold and money. Now gold and money comes back again, yeah, because it's liable to corruption. These attachments are liable to corruption. Someone who is tied, infatuated, and attached to such things, themselves liable to corruption, seeks what is also liable to corruption. This is the ignoble quest or search. So what does it mean that partner and children are liable to corruption? What does that actually mean? And usually the Pali word here is upakilesa or sankilesa, which is related to the idea of upakilesa. And in the suttas, what that means is that you have defilements of the mind. Yeah, you have like anger and ill will and greed and these kind of things. And these are the corruptions of a person. And so sometimes it is like, you know, you get married to one person and they turn out later on to be someone else. Is anyone here who's married? I'm not married, so I'm not sure, but this is how it often is in life. I don't have to be married, in fact, to know that. You know, it can just be a friend or it can be anyone really in your life, your parents even. And people change over time, yeah? And we are all liable to become more corrupted. We are all liable to sometimes become more angry, yeah? When you meet someone, very often when you, let's say it is like a couple relationship, in the beginning it's very beautiful and rosy and everything is beautiful. And then the more natural personality comes through over time, yeah? And then you see all the downsides of that person, all the kilesas, all the defilements. And then people also change over time. Maybe they have a very stressful job. Maybe they come under the influence of some bad people. And because of that, they actually develop bad qualities. They become more angry. They become more like an ogre or whatever. Yeah. And this is what happens to people. We are liable to corruption. And because of that, it's kind of scary. We don't know what's going to happen to the people around us. They may turn in a different direction. They become more selfish, more greedy, more all of these negative qualities. That's actually very unpleasant to see that. Or when you have children in your life, you don't know what's going to happen with your children. Are they going to turn out to be really nice? You have no idea. We demand of our children to get straight A's at school. But what if they are a dum-dum? What are you going to do then? What if they're not so smart, right? What if you have really smart parents, but the child is really stupid? There's no guarantee that your child will be smart just because the parents are smart. I know that there was some kind of idea in Singapore a while ago. I think that was Lee Kuan Yew while he was still alive. The idea that if we want to have all the PhDs to get married together, to get really, really smart children. And I think usually there is some truth to that, right? Because usually it is a genetic thing that you have more smart children if you have smart parents, but it isn't always true. Sometimes it misfires, right? And you get this really dumb child. And what are you going to do? Are you going to, if a child cannot get A's, well, it can't get A's. End of story. You can't demand that from the child. The child comes with a personality from the past, yeah? And that personality is already given to a large extent. And your influence as a parent is only a little bit. Yeah, it isn't that great. So the point is that people are what people are. Our ability to change is often not very great, yeah? The reason why we get angry with other people is we think they should behave differently. But usually they can't behave differently. What's the point of getting angry with someone who can't change? This person can't change anyway. Getting angry is crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Instead, we should have compassion for them. And then we should explain, actually, try not to do this. This is going to be bad. Everyone is going to suffer if you act in this way. Don't use drugs. Don't steal things. Don't, if you steal things, you're going to go to prison. Have you been to Changi prison? Don't want to be in Changi prison. I've been there. It's not a nice place to be. It's really scary. I've been inside once. I come to meet some of the inmates who were Buddhist. All these locks and doors and steels and concrete and guards and barbed wire and what have you. Once you get in, you're afraid you will never get out again. That's what I was thinking. Will I get out of here? It's kind of scary to go inside. And you don't want to be locked up in a place like that. And so instead you have compassion for people in your life. But we remember the downside. Yeah, we don't know what people are like. We don't know how they're going to develop. We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know. There's so many uncertainties, so many unknowns. We too are liable to corruption, right? And this is what this is saying. So we have to actually actively seek not to be corrupted, to avoid the corruptions from kind of entering us and making us into worse people. And that, of course, is what we come to next, which is the noble search. And of course, then you have money and gold. Yeah, of course, gold and money gets corrupted. It gets counterfeit gold and money in the world. That happens all the time. And so that is how that gets corrupted and why that is included here. So this is the ignoble quest. And then, of course, we come to the noble quest next. And it is too late now to get into the noble quest. So that is going to be, we're going to come back to that again tomorrow morning. But that is what is ahead of us. And of course, that is what is interesting. And that is what the Buddha sets out on. He sets out on the noble quest. And then we will see if we can follow in the footsteps of the Buddha and also enter that noble quest ourselves. So, yes, excellent, good. So please have a nice cup of tea, enjoy yourself, and we'll see you back again this evening at 7:30.